evening, everyone. Once again, welcome back to Bigos Entertainment, Straight Talk No Chasers. We got special guests again, Pastor Stan Hood, Miss Paula, and Miss Kim, and my moderator, my engineer, Johnny O'Neill. We're going to start tonight with a very good topic on the Candyman. And while we're reviewing the Candyman, we're going to review the roles of the black church and its pastors from slavery to the civil rights movement. Good evening to you, Pastor Hood.
Good evening. Good evening. Thanks for having me back again.
No problem. No problem. It's good to have you back.
All
We're gonna,
right.
we're gonna jump straight into it, though.
All right. All right, everyone. Candyman is the subject of uh, the state of the black church. Where are we, and how did we get there? All right. So we can go back pretty far with the institution of black pastors in during slavery. Before they had integration during slavery, they had this thing called praise houses. All right. And that's when, after working all week and doing everything they're supposed to do, black folks would slip away in these little shacks and have church. Right. They would hear what Master had to say and how he would bend the Bible to justify their condition. However, don't think for a minute that they were stupid. They were very smart people, and they would encourage one another. We know the outgrowth of that is Negro spirituals that were coded and giving signs and signals in the lyrics of discussing running away or stay put or danger is coming. We know those things in Negro spirituals, but there was an advent in preaching and encouragement. When slaves were first brought to this country, there were natural leaders based on relationships. But with crossbreeding and selling kids and all of that and breaking up families, leaders emerge for different reasons. And so, out of fear of the praise houses, they would then put black people in the balcony of white church services. And in the balcony, they had rules. They were supposed to behave themselves and listen to what the man had to say. But they found at some point that wasn't as effective as they thought that it would be. People were generally unhappy. There were still uprisings and running away. And so what they did was develop their own preachers on the plantation. And that preacher had to be someone that the master trusted to basically just encourage the people that their reward was on the other side of death. They should not expect joy, happiness, and freedom now, but freedom comes in heaven. And so if you fast forward, of course, there were some famous slave revolts and uprisings, even by preachers, both here and on the islands. But I wasn't given a long time to give a college class, so we're going to fast forward. All right. So after slavery, the biggest mistake made during the Civil War was not to punish the loser. The reason for punishing the loser of any war is to kill the idea. All right. So that's why countries pay heavy taxes when they lose. But brother against brother in the Civil War was ugly and heartbreaking. And for whatever reason, they just said, if you lay down your arms, you can go home. That was the biggest mistake this country ever made. There should have been, just like any other wars, there should have been taxation on the South. There should have been executions. And I know I'm a preacher saying this, but you find this even in the Bible, that you have to drag the case out before the world to make sure that the people who were disillusioned by the revolt's leaders understand that they were wrong. But when the choice was made not to punish them, and then Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, the stigma of slavery and the justification on the side of the rebels continues to this day because they were not properly punished. And so, well, what does that have to do with the Black church? Well, the Black church then uh, was easily infiltrated. After the Civil War came this thing called eugenics. And just as it was big in Germany, it had a counterpart here in America, 1916 to 1925. Just so happened that there was a president in the United States who was a known racist. And so he was showing KKK movies, and eugenics was allowed to grow. And what is eugenics? It's elimination because of deficiency. That some people will either be sterilized or just killed because they were seen as inferior. It was not just Black people, it was what we call hillbilly poor whites and Asians and so on and so forth, Native Americans. These deficiencies were noted and measured, and it was taught based on Darwinism, meaning that this is not a spiritual exercise, but it's an exercise based on survival of the fittest. And the reason that the world is not becoming what it's supposed to be is because the weakest are allowed to pull on society and drain it. Right? This is not Trump's campaign speech. This was the thought process of America. All right. So you have Margaret Sanger, who the things I'm saying, we can't go too deep into it, but you have to look it up. These names. Margaret Sanger arose as a heroine of eugenics. And Margaret Sanger had an idea that the best way to eliminate the threat of Black babies is to do it in the womb. Right? So she went on this campaign about abortion, but she knew that she could not get the cooperation of African Americans without the Black preachers. Aha. Right. So what she did is she went to Harlem and she had some names, Du Bois or Dubois, right? And some other famous names. And she used them to convince young Black women that an unwanted pregnancy was not the end of the world, that you can terminate it. She needed a place to start clinics. And before there was a single abortion clinic, um, there were rallies at the biggest Black churches in New York with Black preachers endorsing Margaret Sanger because she promoted it as a health issue instead of what it was, which was genocide. And she secretly paid those preachers $500 each. Now, I don't know about you, but in 1921, $500 is a lot of money. And so it was not so much about trying to help people, but what you saw now is the state coming into a union with the preacher to influence Black people. And ever since then, everyone who has run for president, the winner and the loser, always stop by the most popular Black churches. Now, back then, it had to pass by word of mouth. But when you get into the 1980s, it comes the advent of what we call the megachurch. Of course, we had the Billy Grahams and those people beforehand, but it wasn't televised like TBN and some and Daystar and some of the others. When the megachurch came into play, it is believed, because this is my belief, I don't hear what everybody else has to say, it is believed that, first of all, it was not attractive to the Black male, because now this preacher is in competition with the man of the house, right? And we talked about the other things in the Black family last time, but The way the church was up until then is your church is only supposed to be as big as the people you can pastor. In other words, if it gets to the point where you can't personally know every member in your church is too big, you need to split and make another one. But it went in the opposite. Now they are consolidating to this big old organizations that the figurehead is not God, but the figurehead is a personality that's very charismatic. And then we begin to see that not only did a lot of people follow them, but smaller churches joined the big church to make a mega church. And so the question is that good? Was that good for the Black family? Was it good for the Black community? Or did it damage Christianity overall? And there are certainly follow-up questions to it. But how does the panel see this movement from the local pastor on the corner store who baptized my grandchildren? He buried my grandmother. He knows the whole family. He raised money, had rent parties. Remember that? It raised money to pay the rent. He came and got you out of jail. It went from that to you may never meet your pastor in person. You may never meet him unless you are a huge donor or a famous person. Then you have to love him from afar because he doesn't know you. Okay, I could say a lot more, but I feel like I talked a long time. So I wanna get some thoughts from
So
the
what
panel.
so
Go
what you said that was more of a business aspect than a religious aspect?
for the megachurch.
Yes.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. It became it. The earlier churches in the Black community, the pastor worked a full-time job and he paid the bills at the church. If it came up short, it was on him. He treated the church house like he treated his own home. So he wouldn't let anybody outwork him or outdo him in the church. And that's certain. We're certainly far from that now. Now we're working on two jets instead of one.
Any more guests? Any more questions from the panel? Okay. Well, we have no other questions. Well, do you think from that transition from the family worship centers, is that the what helped motivated speakers? The transition. Describe that transition for me.
From family worship
From
centers.
family worship centers to a motivational speaker. Kind of
Well,
educate me on that.
yeah. Well, for the African American worship and the church was the glue that kept people from going insane. It wasn't just about the preacher; it was about the other families that we came to make our family, whether they were blood or not. It was a place where I'm understood and people and I understand others, and we stand together. We discuss issues in the community. We strategize. We feed the hungry. Right. We do after school programs and all of that. And I remember I went back to 1916 to 1925. Uh, when you monetize that, then you're no longer sure about the motive of the leader. Now, when the leader is working one or two jobs to try to make sure the bills in the church get paid and he's helping other families, you know what his motive is. It's to do good. But when you monetize, meaning that you bring the government grants in, and I'm not talking about all grants aren't bad, but some grants are conditional. And then you have political relationships. For instance, it began with SNCC and then the NAACP, and now there are so many different organizations you can't keep up with them. When um, preachers became spokesmen for political parties, there are back end monetary incentives for that. You have the dinners now where it used to be potluck after church, now it's $100 a plate because there is a financial incentive for the pastor. So I don't know the problem becomes now, am I preaching the truth of the Bible or am I saying what I need to say to keep people joining so that I can have influence? Nobody knows but the preacher himself.
Mm.
Well, with that being said, Pastor, had a question come in to me earlier this week because we have publicized this show.
Mm-hmm.
Is how can preachers and pastors talk about something and preach about it that they're doing in the streets, but they're preaching about it on the pulpit, telling me not to do it. And
Well,
I
they're
see
not.
them, and I see
Yeah,
them out there doing it.
yeah, because they're not converted. You know what I mean? That's a short answer of it. When you are a true believer, whether you are a good saint or a struggling saint or an ain't, you're going to make mistakes. The issue is not with making mistakes because you're human. You're not Jesus. You're not God. The struggle that you have with leadership is when you repeat things over and over and over again and then get up and tell other people to do not to do what you yourself are doing. Now you're either skewing the Bible or you don't really believe God sees you. And the issue is, remember we talked about the sunk cost fallacy. It
Mm-hmm.
happens in church too. People get so invested. Remember the Eddie Long scandal? You know, they kept bringing out one witness after another, more evidence after another. And a lot of the members had trouble detaching themselves emotionally from what they felt about him and embracing the evidence that was coming forth, to the point where people will be mad at the victim instead of shunning the victimizer. And that's when you know that this is not really God's church now. We have gone left. And the issue is not whether or not we recognize it, but are you willing to leave? Are you willing to get out of that situation? That is the problem.
And you see that in a lot of churches these days too, Pastor,
Hmm.
Mhm.
where the congregation is no longer worshiping the Lord; they're worshiping that person standing up at that pulpit.
Yeah.
Now you're worshiping a false prophet.
Mm, mm, mm.
Which come back
Yeah.
to the next question: is there anything wrong with what the church has become?
Well, it depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking to be saved, then yeah, there's something wrong with it. You know,
I
but
mean,
if you're looking to be entertained, then there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, what is the real difference? We're talking about a mega church mentality now. What is the real difference between paying your money and going to a concert or putting your tithe in the plate after you've been thoroughly entertained? What is the difference? If nothing is going to change in your personal life, then what exactly are you doing?
that's a good question.
Well, I see instead of reinvesting that money back in the church, I see a payroll.
Yeah.
I see a payroll going to certain individuals. Going back to what
Mhm.
Johnny was saying, how could you counsel me, but you out here in the street making babies?
Yeah.
All right, but then you want to counsel me. Half your church leaves you,
Hmm.
and you got those strong followers that stay with you, and
Hmm.
you tell them this is my church. I do what I want. I thought
Hmm.
church is for a meeting place for the people.
Hmm. Yeah, that's exactly right. And it becomes disheartening. Um, you know, do I think that a pastor should be forgiven if he messes up? Well, sure, if he believed he messed up. You know, but if you're all arrogant, you're lying about it. I mean, what happens with our kids? If they tell us the truth, we don't blow up like that. But when they lie, they know that you know they're lying, but they keep lying anyway. Then your temperature starts to rise and you start to get upset. You know, so the this is why the preaching is so watered down, because as you said, you worrying about the payroll and meeting the bills. I mean, imagine if you're meeting in a small looking football stadium, you got 20,000 members and you got overhead. Do you really want to preach the unadulterated truth and convict people of sin and tell folks who just refuse to do wrong to get up out of here? We ain't putting
Mhm.
up with that. you start thinking now, well, maybe I should be nicer and avoid this and avoid that. And that's how it all starts. That's how me as a pastor personally, I have been in rooms where so many unethical things have taken place. For instance, I go and be a guest speaker for a pastor, and after the service, all the money that's collected is on his desk in front of him, and there's nobody else in there, and he's counting it. That is unethical, but that happens all the time. And then you take a little bit out of one of the pots and hand it to me, man. You did a great job. Thank you so much. And I'm like, I don't want that, because this is not how God said his church ought to be run. Nobody is beyond accountability. When money comes into my church, I go nowhere near that room where money is counted. I don't deal with anything like. There's a whole suite of people that take care of the business, and there's somebody watching them. And that particular, and then we have a budget, we have a board, and whatever that board does, it has to go to the church as a whole. They get full transparency, and they vote to approve or disapprove what we've done. That's how God designed church, not this thing that's happening now where you got a dictator.
And I'm gonna pass it over to the judge. She's came in too, because she's been sitting there, her eyebrows went up a couple of times. So I'm gonna pass it over to her. But every church, like any other organization, should have an annual audit. There should be some kind of check and balance in place to make sure things are going the way, to the right way they should be going, and not going the left way and going to somebody's pocket and going out the door.
That's right.
Good evening, Judge Carpenter. I see your eyebrows light up a couple of times. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Good evening, everybody.
Evening.
Yes, it did a few times, but I tell you, Pastor, I'm glad you just gave the example of going to a particular church and going in the back in the pastor's study and seeing the money on the table, and you realizing that, okay, that's not the way things should be done, right?
That's right.
That's a good example, and because the thing is, to me, when it comes to, I want to speak just a minute on the mega churches. There are, of course, there are positives and negatives both ways, whether you be dealing with a huge church or dealing with a small church. Some of the same things that may be going on in mega churches are going on in the smaller churches. It's just that they're not, they're not highlighted. Nobody's looking at them because it's a small church. But when you're a large church on TV, then of course that spotlight is on you. And particularly when you as a pastor begin spending the money that you've gotten, then of course it's even, the focus is even more on you. But I would say that we have to not only have a relationship with the Lord, but we have to know the word for ourselves. We have
That's
to.
right.
And so the more we know the word, then when we go to a church, whether it's a small church or a mega church, when we're listening to that word or listening to what that pastor is saying, if it's not the word, then we're going to catch it. Because we have discernment. God has given us that discernment to know, like, wait a minute, no, that's in contradiction to what the Bible says, And so again, with mega churches, there are some. I would agree. I believe there are some, pastors of mega churches who are not on open up. They're not honest. I certainly agree. But there are also pastors of very small churches who are not very honest as well. Now, I'm sure some will say, well, yeah, but the more money you have, the more this you have, the more you may. I guess you may have more of an unction to kind of go in the wrong direction or whatever. But I believe at the end of the day, it's the character of that person. It's the character. And I think whether they are on this huge stage or on a small one, if we take the time to listen and not get caught up in the hype, as you were speaking of earlier, not get caught up in all the huge things that are going on before the sermon starts and that sort of thing, where it's like you go into a concert, and I'm not saying that, I know some churches, they they have the praise and worship beforehand, and yes, we need that, that helps get us into to feel the atmosphere, which we should already come with that already, but that's another story in itself.
Mm-hmm.
But it gets us positioned to hear from, in a better position to hear from the Lord. So that's all good. But then when it becomes like a concert, and because that music, and I think we talked about this maybe a few
Mm-hmm.
shows ago. But some of
Mm-hmm.
that music is just over the top now, so much so that you cannot. You feel nothing. You feel nothing. It's as though you just listen to any other secular song. You feel nothing, and so when it's like that, then it puts another type. To me, it's not and I know the word I'm looking for, but it's not real. It's not authentic,
Mm-hmm.
and so it does not touch us in the same way. But all in all, because I'm going to hand it over to the ladies as well. But again, I think the more we learn and know the word for ourselves, the better we can discern, and we know what we're dealing with. We'll know whether or not this pastor is truly speaking the word, because I can tell you there's some churches maybe around my city where there are some pastors that preach on their word, and then there are some that do a lot of hooping and hollering. So
Mm-hmm.
why are you hooping and hollering? Are you hooping and hollering because that's what you've been taught, that's what you've learned? Or are you hooping and hollering because you don't know the word like you should know the word?
That's right.
So again, but I would say we have to know the word for ourselves, and then we can be better discerners of those spirits.
Mm-hmm. Can I jump in on something you said, because I don't want to forget it.
Mm-hmm.
You make a good point when you say it could be a small church or a large church,
Mm-hmm.
because what has happened is that now some pastors come into it with dreams of being a mega church pastor, but they got about 10 people in their church. Right. And so they spend their early years of ministry disappointed because they have the wrong idea of what success is. And success is having a bunch of people and a lot of money and notoriety, but that's not a biblical definition of success. So this is why you can see the same kind of corruption in a tiny church that you see in a mega church, because they're trying to scratch and claw their way up the ladder to become that person that they're dreaming that they could be. But God doesn't even choose people like that. Most of the people that God chooses are reluctant people, because humility is a main requirement of pastoral leadership. And so the other part of it is there are some megachurches, and this may shock you, that were grown the right way, and they're not Candyman. Right? I can tell you one right off the top of my head. For years, TD Jakes preached in the backwoods, just like I described, paying the bills, picking up kids from school, and doing this, that, and the other. And it was just a chance, or I wouldn't say it was a chance, it was divine providence. And trust me, we're not even the same denomination or nothing, but truth is truth. That somebody canceled on TBN, and and somebody said, I know somebody who's always ready to preach. And they called him in, and he got that national exposure, and it just went from there. It just went from there. So grassroots success is not bad. Gaining funds, money, notoriety, a bunch of people, that in and of itself is not a bad thing. The bad thing comes is when you violate Psalm chapter 1. Psalm chapter 1 says there should be a counsel of the wise. We don't sit in the seat of the scornful, nor stand in the way of sinners. Standing in the way of sinners is not showing people where you're coming from in the word. Every sermon I preach, and I'm not bragging, I'm just saying I believe what I'm saying. Every sermon I preach, I take people with me. You're going to see every last one of those scriptures where it's found. And I tell people, you can freeze frame your device. You can take a picture of it. You can ask me for it later. I will send people my presentation. You say, you're not scared they're going to preach it? No, because I got a lot more. I want you to know that this doctrine is sound. So there, Psalm 1 tells you exactly how a preacher ought to run a church. It means he shouldn't run it alone. There should be a board, a council of the wise, that there are checks and balances, just like Washington, D.C., 3 legislative branches, not one king or dictator, because it's going to go wrong. I don't want to be in a position where I'm going to be tempted that way, where I have so much power that nobody can check me. For instance, a pastor should receive a salary. So whether he preach good or preach bad, the money don't go up when you preach good, and it don't dip low when you preach bad. You shouldn't be passing the plate 3 or 4 times. That means that you are a poor money manager, right? If you have trained the people correctly, if you have taught them the benefits of making God the head of your life, you never have to beg for money. I've been preaching 21 years and I've never had to beg, because the people that I were preaching to, I wouldn't leave them behind. As I get educated, they get educated. As I improve my home life, they improve their home life. It is a statistical fact that when you make people aware of the keys to success and they live it, then they automatically come up in their financial and social status. That is good pastoring, not he get richer and they stay poor.
And you see a lot of that going on. And that leads to the next question is, how can we get our black men back into church? Because us black men seeing pastors riding in 2021 Cadillacs, Escalades, whatever the new car is.
Oh no, I got an Escalade, Brian. Don't preach.
I ain't saying you about your Escalade, man. But the average guy here riding in a Hyundai.
Yeah, he got a different car for every day of the week, right?
Yeah.
He got the best suits there are. You never seen him in the same suit twice. All that kind of stuff. Yeah. This is okay. I'm looking at the clock now.
We're on time. We got good time. We're working on good time, Pastor.
As the pimps of the 70s faded out, the pimps in the pulpit faded in. Oh, I'm gonna keep it real. Those early characters of the early 80s that became notable, they were these dudes getting their nails done, their eyebrows waxed, and all their teeth polished, and they're getting corrective surgery and Botox, and I'm getting their hair processed, and all that. And y'all don't act like you don't remember the early 80s. There was a lot of gray area between men and women. There was some guys that you didn't know if they was straight. Yeah, what I'm saying, it was new in the 80s, and you just wasn't sure, right? You see these pretty dudes with these beautiful women, and you just confused, right? So that pimp mentality, because remember, in the hood, the biggest heroes are the pimps and the drug dealers, because they got the money. Even if you don't like them, you could borrow money from them, right? And so black men recognized that when they saw that. And ladies, I didn't intend to make y'all mad at me this time, but I gotta say this. A man knows when his woman gets all giddy over another man. When
You're
she's
absolutely correct.
She can't stop grinning. Her face gonna break. He on her mind all the time. But this is by design. That Candyman has created the environment. That's why I use the club. People have done stuff in the club they'd have never done in broad daylight. But it's that atmosphere that's created the whole thing to make you feel a certain way. And I'm gonna tell you something. There was a preacher here recently. He was single for a long time, pretty little light-skinned guy, friend of mine. I ain't gonna say his name. I'm gonna make him mad at me. He was single for a long time, and so all the single women in the church loved him, and some of the married women too. The day that man said that I want to introduce to y'all the love of my life that I'm now engaged to, women start literally crying in the church. Women start boo-hooing all over the church. And it wasn't just single women. And can you imagine a husband sitting there looking at his wife? If you don't straighten your face, they're crying because he's now off the market. What does God have to do with that?
Nothing.
right? But he's created a fleshly atmosphere instead of a spiritual atmosphere. And I have witnessed it firsthand. When you're touchy feely, you got personal one-on-one time, you're talking, you change your voice. I know some preachers that do it. They change their voice, and they're that soothing, calming, loving, attentive father figure. Say things like that just like this. Oh, you changed your hair this week. That really looks good on you. Man, she thinking about that all week long because nobody else told her that. Y'all, I'm trying to put y'all up on game. Y'all better listen to Pastor Hood. You better listen to Pastor Hood. But when it's special offering time, she don't care what her husband says. She putting everything into play. And see, but so black men were looking on, and they're saying, no, I see what this is. This is the same hustle that's in the street. And I'm a pastor telling you they are right. They are right. A pastor should guard his relationships with the women of the church. And I didn't always know that because the pastor is vulnerable too. That goes both ways because my sisters be lining up. They look better going to church for the pastor than they do going out with their man. Oh, no, you didn't. Yes, I did. No, you did. Yes, I did.
And you see it if you go into the church, you will see that.
Mm-hmm.
If you look to your left, you'll see the look on Judge Carpenter's face too.
But we're gonna move up to Miss Hudson up here because she raised a couple eyebrows and made a couple faces.
Mm-hmm.
I have nothing to say tonight. Here we go.
Oh no, not you. You always have something.
Well, because I feel like it's factual, and a lot of things, we grow up when we children, we see them different things, and we don't question it because everyone is doing the same thing. When you reach a certain level in life, and you start questioning things, and you watch, you're more very observant, and I know in some churches, where we have a line of deacons, a whole row of them, and they sit there and they watch these young girls grow up.
Yeah.
And then you watch them, and then they're hitting on these young girls.
I don't play that.
And then the pastor things like sometimes the minister picks his deacons that he know will go in his direction, whatever he says. Weak men.
Mm-hmm.
And this happened. This is still happening, And so I don't have anything really to say negative about what you're saying.
No, it doesn't have to be negative.
No, it's a fact. It's happening. And you wonder why men won't go to church. And they'll say exactly what you all have said. I don't ever hear him, but he got to say he out here doing everything in the street. Well, more than likely, some of them have seen him do some things or heard of him. And then sometimes they throw all of the pastors in the same basket, which is not fair. It's not fair because all of them not doing the same thing, I don't guess.
No, that's not true. And remember how we ended the last topic we had about the Black family. What was the solution? Good Black men need to speak up. They need to stop being afraid about who like it and who don't like it. How you get Black men back into the church. You develop clear policies and procedures and follow through with consequences. The pastor shouldn't have a girlfriend, a wife, and illegitimate kids in the church. I've seen it where the ex-wife won't leave, and it's just a big old mess. And that none of that has anything to do with God. So we have to choose. We have to choose based on the life that a man is living or that a woman is living, because we have women pastors too, and we have some good ones. We have to choose based on the life they're living, not on how cute they are and how much you like looking at them or how much you like listening to them. It's an indictment on us as a community because we are so much into entertainment-based fields, whether it be sports or music or whatever, or movies. And then we kind of carry over that sentiment into the church. But that goes back to Chicken George, right? If you can fight these chickens, you can win your freedom, right? And so we found entertainment as an outlet. And so, but the good news now is that the younger generation are far more educated. It's not that Black people ever despise education. It just took too long. When you're struggling, it's nice to say become a doctor or a lawyer, but are you going to become $200,000 in debt and wait 8 years? How many people think like that? No, I'm struggling now, or my mother is struggling now. I need to help her now. That's why you have so many superior Black athletes, because just because they love the game, is because they're trying to change the destiny of their family. And so we ought to have standards and require ministers to meet those standards. There should be a review board that does not just consist of church members, but of community members. If you have a mix of community and church, you get accountability. And yes, Big O, my church is audited every year by independent auditors. And that those audits are made public, as they should be, because it's a nonprofit organization.
Well, that leads me to the next question at hand, Pastor. Is there anything wrong with pastors becoming extremely wealthy?
Well, it depends on how they become wealthy. It depends on how they become wealthy.
Well, you got. I'm not saying all pastors. I'm saying some.
Go ahead.
That dip their hands into. You touched on this. They dip their hands into that money that they've been collecting when they didn't pass that plate around 3 or 4 times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, the pastor should never touch the money. He should receive a set salary with a contract that's been agreed on between him and the church, or if they're a denomination, a higher, or it should be a set salary, and everybody should know what that is. And if there is a discussion about a raise, that goes before a board. Why is it that we're professionals until we go to church? You know what I'm saying? How is it that we have ethics and all that until we get to church? That's some nonsense. And then while I'm at it, a pastor should not be able to start on his bachelor's degree and make it to a doctorate in 1 year in the basement of the church. That's not a real education. If you're only if you've been through from bachelor to doctorate and you only had one professor, you don't really have a real education. It should not be something you can fill out online and send some money in. And I'm saying this because there are people who work hard to get where they are, and they should not hold the same title with somebody who filled out some paperwork online and sent in $150.
No.
You know what I'm saying? That makes us all look fake and cheap. Get a real education, and then you'll see the church level of the church come up right along with the pastor. If you believe that God is watching you, then you will act accordingly. See, if a pastor don't really believe God watching him, then anything can go down. Right? So no, there's nothing wrong with a pastor becoming extremely rich. It depends on how he does it. If he, for instance, if a man write books, if he, if his sermons are extremely popular and they're selling and all of that, then more power to him. But if you become rich by hustling, meaning telling people that they're okay when they're not okay, then God's gonna have the final word on that.
You ain't talking about like selling spring water, are you?
No. We ain't talking about selling this little sand that came out of Israel. I brought it back with me. The Pope blessed it. This is Peter Big Toe right here. And if you send in a minimum offering, all that stuff is food, or prophecies. That's another thing. People sell prophecies, and it's a bunch of foolishness. Same thing with fake healings, because all of them got exposed during COVID. I mean, what happened to the people who would come down and just touch up or blow on people, and they didn't? You hear from none of them during COVID. They all just went silent, didn't they?
They went very silent.
If the healing can happen in your church, it should be able to happen on the street, right? It should be able to happen at the hospital. That's nonsense.
There's another question. You said something when we said about being audited, and like Johnny has said as well, about there's nothing wrong with a pastor becoming wealthy, but churches are nonprofit.
Mm-hmm.
A nonprofit organization is supposed to get that money and flip that money back around into its community. and
That's right.
or into the congregation where they can help in others. What I've seen, I've been in the same church. I remember the same church since I left my parents' church when I was 16 years old in Birmingham, Alabama. They said, "Well, wherever you go, you got to have a church home." So the church start here first.
Yeah.
It's in my heart. All right.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm seeing, like we were saying, even though I do have that Escalade Johnny's talking about,
You work for it.
I work for it. These pastors are not, a lot of pastors are doing right by the people and doing right by God. But you got the ones that are giving them the bad name,
Mm-hmm.
that is living in the mansions, driving the Jaguars, and kids look like they went to the mall every day and got a new outfit, or they walking with $150, $200 Gator shoes on. But you got some of your people in your church that come to church struggling because they only have that one outfit. That's
Yeah.
when I find it it's a problem with pastors not using the church for what it's supposed to be for. It's nonprofit.
Yeah. But well, with a strong board, those things shouldn't be able to happen. The greatest sign of leadership is what happens in the lives of the people you lead. The minute that you become a pastor, you should be training people to take your place, because the
Mm,
gospel is not yours, it's God's, right? So if the people who are following me, if their lives are not getting better, then I'm not really a good leader. I'm a false prophet. And then there's this other side of it too, called supply and demand. People say, well, why don't they make some, I see the same movies on BET all the time. It's always the same thing. Well, they sell you what you're asking for, right? If you support wholesome things, then they will make wholesome things. If
mm,
you support wholesome churches, then churches will see the benefit of being wholesome. But a lot of people, they should come no matter where they are spiritually. They should come because God accepts everybody. But when you keep demanding the foolishness, some people are all right being poor as long as my pastor is rich. I know plenty of people like that. They don't mind struggling as long as he's not struggling because he represents all of us. You ever heard people talk like that? And but it goes back to what I said about becoming a doctor. Becoming a Christian is the same way. If when you sell that it's overnight, then everybody want to do it. You just raise your hands, let me slap you in the face, let me spit on you, let me knock you down, and you good. But if I sell that, you got to struggle to change your habits, change the people you hang around, change the stuff you do, and change how you. Well, wait a minute, change what you eat, change what you watch. Well, nobody. All of a sudden, you don't have a mega church no more because ain't nobody trying to hear that. You
You are
see.
correct. And you said something, Pastor, that I want to get your opinion on. You said God accepts everyone, in which he does.
Mm-hmm.
He accepts you with all your flaws and all your sins. But you got some parishioners in the church that don't accept everyone. And soon as, let's say, a homeless guy walking in the church and he's dressed, he hasn't bathed, they will shun him and stop him from coming in the church. And it's not just the parishioners, it's the congregation also.
Mm-hmm. I just had this happen a couple of weeks ago. I didn't know until after the fact, after church. There's a young man. He looks like he's about in his 30s. He's disheveled, a little dirty looking. And he comes and sits. He's been coming sitting on the front row for months. He doesn't say anything. He doesn't talk to anybody. He sits there. And when the sermon is over, he goes home. Well, I heard here recently that one of my older members, Lord have mercy, at that mother's board, Lord have, one of my older members told him he need to dress better.
mm.
And I did not know that. What happened was I didn't see him last week. And I asked, well, what happened to that young man who sits right in front of me every week? I mean, his attention is locked in. He doesn't look around. He watches the whole sermon and he gets up and leaves. What happened to him? And somebody said, oh, somebody told him he needs to dress better. Now, what do you think I did? Who is that somebody? I want to know who that is. And they wouldn't tell me, right? Okay, so I'm telling the whole church. If I ever, oh boy, you better not never let me catch you saying something crazy to somebody, especially people you don't know. You shouldn't be saying that to anybody. Mind your own business. You know, I have preached a whole series about this, but for some reason, man, you can't stop people from doing this. You know, I've had somebody come into the church drunk, and I've said, leave him alone. He came in, he want to hear a word. He ain't bother nobody. You know, he was thinking, but let him sit there. It ain't gonna hurt nothing. But that's human nature, I guess. But the church has to come strong against that attitude. We all had to start somewhere, and we should never forget where we came from.
We got two more areas, Pastor, and then I'm gonna open the floor up once again before we end the segment because we sight on target. But another thing, going with that mentality, has music become merely entertainment to support or produce the preacher and what they're selling?
Man, I don't even like gospel music no more. All the stuff I like is old. Every now and then, a couple of gospel songs come out that really speak toward heaven. They speak to God. But a lot of it is they competing against each other like gangsters. You know, they dressing crazy and they dancing up a storm. I mean, that little Kirk just a dance his little butt all cry. I mean, they all the same dances they do on the secular stuff. They're doing all the same. And I'm like, what is going on? The question is, where does it leave your spirit when you, after you've experienced a song or music, whatever? How does it leave you? Does it leave you feeling closer to God, or do you feel like you got your, you know, you got your groove on or whatever? I want to share something that never is affiliated with God. Three things: manipulation, domination, and intimidation.
And he said intimidation. He went off, guys. He'll probably be here, be coming right back in. So please pose your questions. Pose your questions, and he will be back in because I wanted to hit that point with him. We've had this conversation over many years. And what do you guys think about what Pastor was saying? Does entertainment, does it support the preacher and what they're doing? What are your thoughts while we're waiting on Pastor to come back?
Man, Judge, you started in on this on one of your earlier segments. Mm-hmm. And you said, you know, some of the music doesn't make you feel a certain way. Right. So could you now is the time to expound on that.
Right. And I certainly believe that. And earlier I kind of spoke on it just for a minute or two. But, you know, the music now, it's like they're just performing. You know, they're not singing praises to God. They're just performing. And what I really, you know, I'm kind of like I do agree with the pastor that most of the gospel music I like now it's old school music. Yes. And not only traditional, but I mean, even what 80s, 90s, it's like, I'm trying to figure out when did I notice it started changing. I would say in a sense that maybe around the time of Kirk Franklin came around, but I got to say at the same time though, that there are some songs that I do like by him. Okay, particularly the slower songs. Again, those songs to me are more worshiping type songs, I believe, you know, and particularly when the words, you listen to the words of the song. There are some songs that you listen to, first of all, you don't even know what they're saying because they're screaming, you know. I mean, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. That is not ministering to me if I can't even understand what you're saying. And then if the drums and music, everything, all this, you know, synthesized and everything, blaring over the voice, that lets you know right there that is not that song is not to worship the Lord. That song, I mean, you're performing. And as the pastor said earlier, it's like you're competing. You're competing with who's going to get this award this year, who's going to get that award, you know, and that's not what it's about. And so now we have, you know, at one point I thought, well, you know, I remember when Kirk Franklin, y'all remember the song, I think it was Stomp.
Stomp.
First heard it, I was like, ugh. You
It
know,
opened the door, didn't
hmm.
it?
But did
And I
you
was,
know, Judge, that song was played in many clubs.
Yes.
yeah, and I heard that too. And you know, and I guess the thing is this, you know, because some people will say, well, you know, it did bring some people in to begin to even want to begin going to church. Now that's a good thing, but at the same time, though, what are they bringing them into church for? Are they bringing them into church to want to see more of that sort of thing? You know, I mean, I guess someone will say, well, you know, it doesn't matter what it brought them in for, as long as it brought them in and you get them in there, then you know, put them in the right direction. But again, it's kind of like what you were talking about earlier, Pastor, when you said that how some young pastors or some young preachers they're starting out wrong because they're seeing this big picture, they're seeing what they want to become, and they're losing sight of the word. They're not even talking about the word half the time. They're trying to uh, um, you know, create some type of whatever with their sermons to make people want to fall out. They want to see who can scream the loudest or who can amen the loudest. You know, and it's not about that. You at the end of the day, you've spoken for 30 minutes and hadn't told anybody anything. You hadn't
Mm-hmm.
deposited anything in their spirit, and that's much like the music today. It's not depositing anything. There are some songs when you hear it, you can just hear the anointing in the person that's singing, in the music, songwriter, all that. You could hear it, but in a lot of that crap, you can't hear it at all. You just cannot hear it at all. You know, and that's what I don't like about the music today.
Yeah, well, David is our example about songwriting. Well, I don't know what the lyrics were to that first song, but Saul was vexed with demons. And when David finished ministering, the demons had to go. The demons shouldn't pull up a seat and say, now that's what I'm talking about. You know, there should be some kind of healing in music because music is powerful. But what happens to the preachers is the same thing that happens to gospel artists in the beginning. That's why their first records are so good because it comes out of their experience with God. And then when you got a hit, well, what happens if God doesn't say anything else for another 2 years? Well, we can't have that. We got to come up with something. You see, this is you can see if you follow artists, you can see where their music changed. Some choirs are like, they started out like Shekinah Glory. It was like, oh my goodness, every last song. It takes me to the throne. And when everybody started telling them how great they were, that next album was trash. I'm sorry if you were part of Shekinah Glory, my bad. But but it wasn't that it was bad. It wasn't anointed. It was forced. They were pressing. And that's what happens when what your ministry creates a lifestyle that you want to try to keep up. In order to keep up that lifestyle, you got to keep expanding your base. And how do you expand your base? You bring in elements that you wouldn't normally bring into your music that appeals to people who you want to buy the record.
And that brings us to our next and last part of this.
Okay.
How do we get our kids back believing in God and back into the church?
Man, there is so much drama at church. And the worst thing, I think Avery's talked about it in a previous podcast, kids should be in a kid's place. But I'm telling you, them car rides and them dinners after church just have turned these kids completely against God. Because all the drama that takes place is within their earshot, and they hear it all. And then sometimes they see their parents not live what they're talking about. And so this particular generation, the last one, is not Generation X or Z. They're called the nuns, Nones. What do you mean by nuns? They're non-committal. They don't believe in anything. Everything is okay because everything has been permitted. And I think that's the saddest testimony ever. But the way you get kids back in the church is to commit to being an upstanding person yourself and don't allow people who are not around your kids. But these mega churches separate the kids from the parents. I know of a church in Florida They got a big old game room. It looked like Dave and Buster's. While the parents upstairs praising the Lord, the kids down there trying to get the high score. And I'm not sure that's ministry. So the church itself has to have the right focus, and then you as a parent. And I'm telling you what really won my kids, because I had to go apologize to my kids. A lot of the ignorant things that we propagate in our community, I did them when my grown kids were younger. And when I learned better, I went and apologized to them and told them I should not have done that. And whatever time we have left, I'm going to do right by you. That's the biggest way to win your child to God, because they see God working in you.
With that said, Pastor, I would like to also let you give a shout out to your YouTube too for your Saturday service, for people can tune in to you and actually hear you and see you in action. And I know, but they don't know. What they see right now is what they get 7 days a week. So could you please give us that?
Oh, yeah. My church is Southeast in Cleveland. You Google that on any social media. The easiest way to get it is Google Southeast SDA on YouTube, or you can go straight to our website, se7day.org. And you'll be there all day listening to me talking crazy. I can't believe that man said that from the pulpit. Yes, I did. But this is in an attempt to get men back in church. There's so many men. I got a baptism on Christmas Day, and it's mostly men who said they would never step foot in the church again.
Amen.
Because they believe in what's happening, which is just be transparent. I learned this, but one time I had a marriage retreat, and I thought it was going to cost a certain amount of thousands of dollars, and it ended up being almost double. And I was sick. The church had the money, but that's not what I told the board. And as soon as I got back, I said, I messed up. I didn't realize they was going to run the price up on me. And I thought they were going to go off. But they said, Pastor, we appreciate you just telling us the truth. Ain't no problem. We got it covered. That experience, because it was an hour and a half ride back to my church. And I was sick the whole way. My wife was like, you want me to drive? I'm like, oh Lord. But when I got back, and they said, as long as we know you mean well, just tell us the truth. That was a turning point in my entire ministry. That was about 3 years ago. And ever since then, I tell the truth about everything, painfully so. And people really appreciate that. We have more members around the country than we physically have in the church. And they are faithful in their giving, and we don't even talk about it that much. We don't get up and beg or anything. We just produce the product. Sunday through Friday, we produce what happens when you get kids coming out of foster care, but they don't have a family. When they turn a certain age, they just give them a few dollars and put them out. What do you do for those kids? What do you do for people who are coming out of the hospital and they can't pay the bill, or they can't take care of themselves or their family? That's what church is supposed to be about. Not about in there just acting the fool. Our actual service is only an hour and 15 minutes. Our real service is Monday through Friday.
All right.
All right.
With that said, Joe,
We're going to go around the horn real quick, see if any last words. Miss Paula, you got anything? Nothing?
I've been waiting.
Okay, go.
No, I've been listening, but and the answer to some of these problems, most of them, is education. And the problem is the church is divided, and we got more devils than we got people who want to stand up for the right thing. And most of the time, if there's a vote put out on the floor, it's going to go to the wrong side because they are supporting things. They're ignorant, and they don't want to learn anything better than what they've done 50 years ago, or they partner with this person. And I found out the education that's authentic and real, they don't want to hear it. and they talk against it more than they are for it. And if you don't have the right pastor up there, you won't get nowhere with anything on trying to educate your congregation, because he's not going to support it, because he's not there. He won't even show up. If there is a in-service or a conference on something, if the pastor's not there, well, what kind of representation is that? He's the leader, and I just found education is missing, the right education, getting up in the pulpit hollering and slobbering at the mouth and everything, and you can't, just like the judge said, I can't understand what he's saying. I mean, he's saying
that's slave stuff. So
he said
Paula, that's the
3
slave
words,
stuff.
and he said, and I'm looking, what? But anyway, I just feel like education is really needed, and we need people that are going to stand up. And you have people who they say things in the background, but they won't come and show them their faces. They won't stand up because they're scared what other people are going to say. And that's damaging to any group, church, anything. They won't stand up. They won't push you out there, but then they won't support you.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I say. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Paula. Ms. Kim, you got anything? Judge Carpenter, you got any last words?
I was going to say, and really this kind of ties into that original question we had about bringing one of the original questions about bringing Black men to the church. And the pastor spoke on this just a few moments ago. And that is, it's about living our lives in the right way. Walking that walk, whatever we're saying that this person should do, that person should do, they should see it in us, and when they see that, when they see us being real with them, then they're more likely to listen to what we have to say. I think about, I've had people ask me in the past, like not only as an attorney, but even as a judge, they ask, well, you just seem like, you just always even kill, you so calm and this and another. It would take people like pastor to get things out of me sometimes, but I don't get that a lot of times. but I am, for the most part, I'm even keeled, but that's the grace of God. That's not me. That's him. That's him that's working through me. And he knows that it's important for me to stay calm so I'll be able to hear everything I need to hear. Because that's most of my job is hearing. You would think it's talking, but it's hearing. Because when you sit down, when you hear people, then you see where they're coming from. Then you will know what to say. And just like we minister, all of us minister every day in our own jobs. We're doing that. We're witnessing to people, and when we witness to people, then they're more likely to say, so. Wow, I wonder why she has so much joy in her heart, or what, and she was going through this, but yet she's still able to maintain. Well, then you begin to kind of, I hate to say reel them in, because it's not so much of a deliberate thing, but in a sense it is. But the more you pull them into you, then you can start testifying, giving your testimony, and then you can finally say, well, you know what? How about you? Would you like to come to my church? And then before you know, they're coming to your church, and then they're listening to your pastor, like the pastor. And so I believe that we, and particularly with you all, with Black men, the more you live your lives, and you all are, of course, you are 4 positive examples of this in action. The more you live the lives that you live, the more you touch other men, and you draw them in. And before you know it, they begin to want to know more about the Word of God, and then they develop their relationship, and then the Lord just brings them right in there, because He's going to do it. He's going to do it. He's going to bring them into that church, and the more we see that, the more Black men will come back into the church, just by doing the things that you all are doing, that you're doing today, and you continue to do every day, and you've been doing for years, and you all continue to do. And I commend you all for that. I truly do. I commend you for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Carpenter.
Thank you.
Pastor Stan, before we get to Mr. Orange, give us a quick blessing.
All right. Well, the last thing is anybody is susceptible to being the Candyman. Well, you could be the Candy Girl. I think New Edition sang that song, Candy Girl. Anybody is susceptible to being the Candyman when forbidden fruit is presented to you. You don't have to look for it. No matter what your profession is, you come to a crossroad where you have a choice between sneakily being dishonest or saying to yourself, if I know it, that's one person too many. I need to do the right thing. It's not big decisions that turn people into these exploiters of hurting people. It's little decisions along the way. And so, if any preacher out there is listening to me, it's never too late to build an accountability team around you. When I first get to a church, I find some good sisters, some old mothers in the church, the ones that ain't got nothing to do, and say, if you ever see one of these young girls grinning in my face, you have my permission to come over and ask, can I help you? You have permission to run interference. And it's not just for them, it's for me. Everybody got a type. I don't care who you are. You have a type that melts you. And so the best thing to do is to be honest with yourself about it and put safeguards in place to protect you from yourself. Little things, it starts with getting the pastor a credit card. As much as possible, I try to avoid that. Especially during COVID. What am I buying for the church? We have a treasury department. If I have something, I will ask them for it. If I have something that I need. So it's safeguarding yourself from the weaknesses that are common to all men. Because I promise you, a lot of these people who are caught up, that's not what they started out intending to do. It was little choices. And we can all learn from the Candyman by asking, have I compromised my integrity in what I do?
Thank you, Pastor. Big O.
With that being said, we were right on time, just a little bit over the night, but it was so positive and so it was food.
Mm-hmm.
It was food that ensured that we was feeding ourselves the right information so we can put it back out and maybe somebody will hear this. Candyman is not what you think it is. Mm-hmm. Right? And that's what we want people to know, how to get back, how to come back, how to become that mentor and that vision in the community. With that said, y'all, make sure you like and subscribe. Share it, tell a friend. And we'll see you guys on the next podcast. That I'm saying, good night.
Good night.